This is an interview I think I've looked forward to my entire life. Rush Randle, as you know, was my favorite surfer growing up. I wanted to be exactly what he was. He's kind of a jack of all trades, insanely talented. So it's gonna be really cool to talk to him and just get some stories out of him. And I'm really excited.
Sure. I mean, we've both been saying this for a long time, but he's literally 25, maybe 30 years ahead of his time. And it's gonna be great to hear some stories and get insights from him because, yeah, he is such a legend. So far, this is gonna be one of our best podcasts yet.
I think so. Enjoy.
I had to live a little off. Yeah, I had to cut a bill off. Yeah, but if we be real though.
All right, here we are.
All right, guys.
Hey, Rush. We're so stoked to have you on. This is going to be really fun.
Thanks, Kai. Thanks, Ridge.
Yeah,
good seeing you guys.
Kai and I grew up just obsessing over what you and the crew were doing back in the day. Just the Jaws stuff, the strap stuff. As you can see, it had a major impact on our lives, and it definitely set the course for what we would do in the future. Is like literally what you guys did back then, which is so it's awesome to talk to you and hopefully hear some cool stories.
Oh, unreal. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, Rush, you were born over here on the North Shore of Oahu, or?
I was actually conceived here and went back to Laguna Beach, was born, and then they flew back here a couple months later, and I was raised right at Rocky Point, Sunset Beach.
Sick. Yeah, so that's, and then at what point did Maui kind of attract you from the North Shore?
Maui attracted me when I was around 12 or 13. I got into windsurfing when I was 10. And, growing up in the North Shore, it was surfing, right? So learned how to surf when I was 5 at Rocky Point. Got into windsurfing when I was 10 with the Angulos. They lived at Rocky Point as well. Mark, Andy, and Josh. And, I guess I was like 12, 13 when windsurfing was kind of like starting to get big. And we went to Maui. And there was junior events. Started some of that. We had a windsurfing event in Diamond Head. Kind of got a hook because, windsurfing's the next level of surfing. It had the aerial acrobatic aspect that surfing didn't have at the time. And I don't know.
It's all the going off the lip, doing aerials, and then jumping on the way out, and that kind of opened the door for you guys to figure out, okay, what else can we do beyond just surfing and windsurfing? Because at that time, those were the only two real action water sports, right? Like kitesurfing hadn't quite been done yet, or foiling, or pretty much any of that stuff. Stand-up paddling.
Yeah, there were no other sports other than surfing and windsurfing, and it was just starting to get credibility because there was some windsurfers on Maui, Mike Waltz, Matt Schweitzer, Craig Yester, Tom Peach. A lot of those guys were from here and over on Maui, and it was just, the next level of surfing. It had the wind, it had aerials, you could jump. Surfing at that time, we were still on big boards, foamy. It wasn't nothing like it was today, or even 10 years after.
When did you discover Peahi or Jaws? Like when did you kind of figure out that place existed? Was it like always a rumor that there was a place, or was it just like all of a sudden when the time came where you were going to start exploring bigger and bigger waves that it was like, wait, there's actually a spot over here? Someone told you.
Okay. Peahi, Jaws. It was an elusive place. It was kind of introduced to a few of us through Jerry Lopez, Victor Lopez. It was a kind of just a how do I explain it? They said, hey, there's this wave. It's this elusive wave. You can hear it at night. You can hear it down the coast. It's this rumble, and it's up the coast. And back then it was all pineapple fields, it was overgrown, just bushes everywhere. We went up one day. They took us up, and it was just this majestic-looking wave. Like
it was perfect.
It was perfect.
Wow.
You sit on the cliff. There's nobody out. It was just...
Could you tell how big it was, or was there no way of measuring, like, oh, is that like, I guess in windsurfing, you'd be like double mast high, triple mast high, or does that just look like a perfect normal wave?
It looked like a comic book drawing. It looked perfect. You couldn't tell how big it was
But it would just go in slow motion.
slow motion, and then it would spit, and you just
You're like,
see this,
that's a big wave. Yeah.
You'd be like, okay, and you count how long the lip took to hit the bottom. 1,001, 1,002. Okay, that's 20 feet. 1,003. Oh, but shortly thereafter, a few of them decided they were going to paddle surf it. They tried to paddle surf it. We watched it. It was just mesmerizing. Like you guys had mentioned earlier in one of the podcasts, it was sitting up there. You just like, it's too perfect to go unridden.
Doesn't make sense, especially the rest of that coastline is so rugged and there's just zero waves from Ho'okipa all the way to Hana. And then there's just this perfect thing. It looks like it was made in a lab or like perfectly crafted.
How do you think it was formed? Do you ever have any ideas? I kind of think it maybe was once like a bigger point and the point fell away and it kind of left that bedrock underneath it and it was like that.
And then the river carved out the channel.
Yeah, from both bays. I don't know. It's a theory because it's not really like there's reef on it, but there are giant boulders under there, like dinosaur eggs.
Oh, yeah. We took National Geographic out to do a lot of the topography of the basic reef section, the breaking section. And it was pretty interesting. They came back saying it's very similar. It might have been the end of like a peninsula that had fallen in. Also, the river mouth that runs out. It gets really deep in the channel, but it's really shallow at the peak.
Yeah.
And as you guys are aware, it's only like maybe 15 feet deep in the middle.
Yeah.
And then it gets really shallow on towards the rocks, and then on the left, it kind of tapers off into that other bay. So I guess over time, it kind of just eroded that section and left just the trench and this. But back to where you asked, how do we see it? It was because Lopez and, the brothers kind of let us...
Victor and Jerry
kind of said, hey, there's this wave up there. Come check it out.
Wow. And
what about like your very first time actually going in the water?
that's what I was going to ask.
Oh,
Like going up there, did you windsurf up from Ho'okipa, or was it like, oh, let's go on the Zodiac or Wave Runners or whatever? What was the craft where you're like, okay, we're gonna finally go out and try to ride this thing? And who was it? The whole strap crew, or were you with Pete, or who would you team up with to go challenge it? Because I just remember hearing stories of like Brett and Dave and Rush, or you, but also who else was up? Josh Angulo sailing up. And then like drifting back in the dark.
Yeah, I mean, as you guys are aware, Ho'okipa, when it's too big, you know that there's really nowhere to go. You can go down to Sprex. There was this wave potentially windsurfable up the coast, so a few of us basically tacked up from Ho'okipa, sailed
like an
up.
hour and a half.
It took a long time. Then you get to the lighthouse area, and it's kind of all chunky and super scary. We got up there and windsurfed it first. And it wasn't the biggest, it was, I mean, on a scale of Peahi, there's big, super big, and scary big.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
3.
there's and we were just up on, a big day. It wasn't scary big, it wasn't.
But no safety net, right? Like if your buddy got wiped out, it was just done. Like, okay, climb up the cliff.
Yeah.
Like, what do you even do?
No,
Or
totally.
do you drag them all the way back
crazy.
down the coast holding the
Oh,
strap?
no. We went straight in on the rocks and got washed in and then up the cliff and then walk up to on a highway. And
At least it
then-
was like pretty nice road up there back then because of the pineapple field and all that.
Yeah, I think, it was pretty well maintained as far as the actual pineapple field went. But with the cliffs and all that was still all jungly.
And then back then too, like nowadays every time it breaks there's the media fanfare. There's a million cameras out there and it feels like it's this big spectacle, but it would have been trippy back then to go up there and there's just nobody around and you're doing it just because you want to ride big waves. You don't have all that other, as you saw probably later at your time out there, there's a lot of people out there that are trying to, either make a career out of riding it or taking photos of it, but it must have been really cool to be out there where there's just none of that. And it's very pure, I'd imagine.
Oh, it was pure, all right.
Yeah.
And it was still new. It was still untapped. It was kind of the unknown. We're going to go up to this wave that we've heard of, see how it works, see if we can even ride it. And as you guys are aware, it's almost twice as windy on the wave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As it actually is because of the apparent updraft. And, you know, you get pinched with the windsurfing sail, you get pushed up towards the lip, you can fly, your aerials are however long you can hang on for.
Oh my gosh, so big.
It's like
And then
paragliding
also
Yeah.
no safety, like, or no flotation, no inflation, just a harness. The other day I
Yeah, we
lost
had
my
it.
gear at Hokipa and I was swimming in my harness. I'm like, gosh, this feels like an anchor. Just because
yeah.
of like the water drag and then the little bit of weight. And I was like, and then that kind of brought me back to, okay, we're going to be sitting down with Rush. I mean, you fall out of jaws and you're literally wearing a weight vest.
We're so spoiled now with the inflation. It's insane.
Terribly
Like,
spoiled.
I think it makes us a little bit, maybe cocky is the word sometimes. You're like, I can pull into this barrel. I can risk it. You know, I have this safety net.
It's like having
But,
a parachute,
You know,
for sure.
but it would have been the approach to riding it and just watching your clips and the Strapped Cruise clips from back in the day. You guys are really pushing it. Like the same as I'd want to now and what Kai wants to, but you didn't have that safety net. It was just all or nothing.
Oh yeah, there was no safety net. It was survival. And, you know, it was a learning curve. You know, it's like, how big could you go without having some sort of safety net? And, you know, we learned our lesson pretty quick.
Was there any close calls where you were out there or you were with someone? I remember our favorite moment, which is the worst moment for poor Brett, but was remember when he broke both his legs in the barrel?
How could I forget?
And then you're driving the
So
ski he's
gnarly.
laying on, right? In the
Yeah.
video that we were watching. We'll pull up the clip. But
Yeah.
just like, we must have watched that a million times because it was just so gnarly. And that was one of those gnarly moments.
Oh, it was gnarly. And that was, again, in kind of the beginning of the tow surfing.
Yeah.
And prior to that, with the windsurfing, we knew it was possible because, you know, windsurfing, you go a lot faster than surfing. Kind of incorporated the foot straps with the tow boards. We're all kind of windsurfing background. Some of us surfing, some of us yacht racing, kind of just windsurfing. But Brett's accident, oh man, stiff-legged, hit the ghost chop, as he called it. And double cartwheel, double knee.
Oh,
see
gosh,
ya.
it still hurts to watch
yeah,
it.
no,
That's
totally.
like-
It's like-
That's an absolute
It's,
nightmare.
It definitely was ingrained in
But
our
how did
brain.
all you guys even come together? Like, okay, the Strapped crew. Like, where was everyone just going to Hokipa and windsurfing? Because I felt like during that era, it was paella. Everyone would probably see each other eating at breakfast, lunch, dinner, you know, and then everyone would be at the beach windsurfing and maybe go surf in the morning, right? It was like such a tight little area. Is that how everyone kind of came together to be like, hey, we're going up to do this. Let's all just do it together?
That's a long story to tell you guys. Growing up here on the North Shore, you know, Laird, big wave surfer, Buzzy Kerbox, renowned World Cup champion surfer, model, windsurfing, Maui, Brett Lickle, windsurfer, Bad Boy, Mark Angulo, windsurfer. We were all kind of, you know, surfers at heart.
Yeah.
Windsurfing, wave riding, windsurfing, not slalom, not racing, not freestyle. And we, like you said, there was a few of us that kind of just met each other, started hanging out. Brett had a sand volleyball court at his house, trampolines. We would just kind of, I mean, we all got along. I had known Mark since I was 3 years old, 4 years old.
So he's a childhood friend you were just coming up with through all this stuff.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, we grew up right here at Rocky Point. You know, before it was Rocky Point, it was just surfers, and his dad started shaping windsurfing. We're like, what is that? For high fly? Oh, okay, let's try that.
Yeah, Angulo, those legendary windsurfing boards.
Legendary and very good shaper. He was also a really good surfer, so he shaped good surfboards. So we grew up with the surfing more in the core than windsurfing. So when we took the windsurfing to Maui, we met a lot of windsurfers.
Yeah.
Like Matt Schweitzer, Mike Waltz, Brett Lickle. And we all kind of, I mean, we all lived in Haiku. So it's kind of, and then Laird was a windsurfer as well, surfing.
He moved over there a little after you guys?
I'm not sure when he moved
Yeah.
over. He was just down the street. We all kind of lived, you know, Haiku is just small little
Yeah, it's a
town.
small
Yeah.
little area.
And like you said, we did run into each other everywhere. But I guess to answer your question, we just kind of all got together and just kind of started hanging out and like, hey, you know.
Because volleyball was a big thing, too. You guys would do, like, Well, even off water stuff. Like that was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you guys would be doing up to something, right?
There was this thing called the mountain board.
Oh, yes,
Oh.
we remember that.
Yeah, you remember
Those
that
are
thing?
cool.
I remember,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
a couple clips
Yeah.
floating around out there.
Yeah, it was like an off-road snowboard.
Had like
Right.
foot straps on it, right?
It didn't have foot straps at first.
Oh, really?
Did you guys put those on?
We put foot straps on it, and then
Yeah.
Brett came up with this brake invention, you know. with
Of course,
brake,
he's
you
the
know,
mad.
just-
He was seemed like the mad scientist.
Oh, totally.
He's
He
like,
was-
"Would you
yeah.
try that?" And you're kind of like, "I don't know." Okay, we'll give it a go.
Yeah. So, you know, we all kind of got a collective mindset together. We all had different aspects of what we could do physically, acrobatically, mentally, financially. And, you know, we just started hey, let's go. You go, I go, oh, we'll all go. Let's do something. Some people had boats, some people had Zodiacs, some people had, well, jet skis weren't really there at the time. But we all had different abilities that we could utilize
Incorporate.
collectively. And it was, I guess, the beginning of what we considered as kind of like a group, you know, like, hey, let's start something.
So wait, the mountain board. You know, we over now. In case you guys were just probably either finding trails to ride or, like over now we have in Makawa Forest is like, you know, some of the world's best mountain bikers have made like crazy trails, and
No way.
they're building a new one on the west side of Maui right now. I was just with him here on the North Shore, Carson Storch. He's like wins Red Bull Rampage. Their guys are gnarly, but Cam Zink, who's also like one of the best, you know, Red Bull Rampage kind of big mountain bike trick guys. He lives on Maui now, and so they're like. I ended up just getting a mountain board. It's funny you say that because I'm like, they have full flow tracks and there's like basically state of the art, like moving dirt. And I'm just wondering, where did you guys try to go with those mountain boards back then? Was it just like find a gulch, or was it like go down the pineapple fields, or just start from Haleakala, which is 10,000 feet to the bottom? Like,
Well, yeah, back then they had the downhill bike company, right? That would go up, take you up.
oh, right.
It was like, and everybody would die. Like people would go off the road and
Yeah, it was
run
incredibly
over.
dangerous.
Oh,
They
it was-
just
yeah.
bring tourists
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
shuffle them all down the mountain. I
Yeah.
think they may still do
Well,
that.
they still do
Yeah,
that, but I
yeah.
didn't realize people were getting that smoked back then,
Oh,
huh?
people were getting slammed head on and into cows, head on into freaking
Oh,
cars.
but were they
coming up.
doing it on the road, or were
Yeah,
they?
no,
oh,
they were
okay.
on the highway.
On the highway,
Yeah.
but back then there was a lot more maybe agriculture going around, right?
Yeah, there was a lot more then.
Yeah.
And we would do the same thing with the mountain boards. We'd go up Holy Poly
Wow.
and do the switchbacks. We'd go through
That's
the field.
steep too.
Oh yeah, it was so steep. That's why Brett came up with the brakes.
Yeah, because you
know?
guys would just start going out of control.
Oh yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
my gosh.
one of the guys ran into a cow and got knocked out.
Oh my.
Yeah, well, one of our crew members.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the beginning of like, okay, safety.
Yeah.
And again, that's land sports, and you know, I'm not really a land dude, so
No, for sure.
I like
Waterman.
water. Yeah.
So when all this stuff was happening, say like you're getting in the mountain board stuff, were you guys in your 20s or 30s, or what point in your lives were that? Because you spent a lot of your adolescence surfing and windsurfing, and then I'm sure you'll get to it when it turns into the towing thing. What stage of life were you guys in at that point?
Yeah, like Jaws towing and you strap, you know, surfing and all that.
That's a good question because I'm a lot younger than some of the guys, or I was a lot younger. Mark was, you know, maybe 3 to 5 years older than me, and then Brett and Pete and Mike, they were like 8, and then, you know, Laird and Buzzy, they were maybe 10 years older than I was.
Oh wow, so you were
Yeah.
the young gun of the crew then.
Yeah, I was a lot younger than some of them, and at the time, you know, I felt like I was an adult. You know, I'd been around the world, seen all these different places. I was very fortunate to come from the North Shore, have the windsurfing ability with wave riding, and be offered this opportunity to go to South Africa. First trip out of Hawaii. Like, you know, it was unbelievable, mind-boggling. And from there, it was, you know, years of traveling, event after event after event.
And was that for what, windsurfing?
It was for windsurfing.
Yeah.
And windsurfing at the time was growing, and it was a huge sport.
Massive.
Massive. There was a lot of money in windsurfing. It was kind of a combination of the yacht world meets the radical windsurfing, wave riding. There was no snowboarding at the time. There was water skiing. There was no wakeboarding. There was
So it was like all this. There was like such a new sport. All this attention was on it.
And it was so radical looking to people that have never seen anything like that. I just
totally.
can't imagine seeing windsurfing for the first time. Must have been insane.
Yeah, it was bizarre.
Yeah.
You know, especially some of these places where it's snowing on the beach.
Yeah.
Probably the
It's-
most affordable at the time too. Sailing craft.
Yeah, I can imagine it was.
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
Maybe even still might be.
I don't know. I tried to get some
Probably.
windsurfing equipment the other week, and it was a lot more expensive than I remember.
Yeah. No, but I mean, versus like getting a boat or something.
Oh
you know?
yeah. No, I can't. I mean, boats nowadays are in the $100,000.
Oh gosh,
for a
it's so
wakeboard.
crazy.
Huh.
And then
Yeah,
you
it's like-
started traveling the tour doing flow rider. There was a flow rider tour, which is that
Oh.
like the first wave pool,
Stationary
Oh,
wave
yeah.
stationary wave,
with 4 inches of water.
in concrete, or was it padded?
Well, depending how you hit it.
Oh gosh,
It
where you
was-
hit it, right?
Yeah, it was a combination of a pad with like a fiberglass, and there was a mobile wave. And again, a lot of this had to do with Strapped, because Strapped was a group of athletes. So a lot of these people that were coming up with these different sports were like, hey, let's get these guys over to try it, like guinea pigs. Hey, you guys
Or they
can
were
come
just
do
like
this.
they almost made it around you guys in a way. Like it sounds like.
Yeah.
Because it's
No,
like,
I
oh,
wouldn't
well,
know.
like we can do this thing with this wave, and if we get Rush Randle and a few of these other strapped guys, they'll be able to ride it because no one else will be able to do it. Because
Yeah.
at the time, like no one was doing any of that, right? Like the strapped surfing and
No, not at all. It
Yeah.
was connected surfing.
Connected
It was
surfing.
different. It's not surfing. We never said it was surfing. It's connected surfing. It was,
it was just a
kind of-
different discipline.
yeah, it was a combination of windsurfing, snowboarding, surfing, wakeboarding. It was connected surfing. They're not paddling on a longboard. But the flow rider, now that was rad. First trip, they took the strap team, bunch of us, to Norway, to this stationary wave and bow, Norway. And we were like, oh,
Whoa.
what is this thing? It's like this.
Who invented it? Was it a Norwegian guy?
No, I think it was Tom Lochtefeld.
Okay.
He had a thing called Wave Lock.
Oh yeah, he's
And-
kind of a legend in the wave pool. Who were like? There's some heavy names you guys from all across different sports, from snow to skate. Like you were mixing it up with some hammers.
Like Tony Hawk was in there too, right?
Oh,
Turget.
Oh, Terry! Oh my God, that was one of the most amazing tours that somebody like myself, growing up on the North Shore, growing up on Maui, looking at all these winter sports, land sports, to be introduced with skateboard legends. This is here's Tony Hawk, here's Terry Hawkinson, here's Chris Miller, here's Christian Fletcher, Bill Bryant, Beaker.
Yeah.
You come across these athletes in different sports, and they're all so unique and so gifted, and you can learn from everybody. Everybody's got their own style, their own, skinny twigs, short, lumpy, kind of
It's
just
so
stocky. And you're
crazy.
like, how can you guys be that athletic? And
Yeah.
you just learn and had fun. But it was like mind-boggling to cruise with Tony Hawk. I mean, this was before the whole Tony Hawk.
Yeah.
It's before
Pro
he did
skater.
900 and all that
Yeah, it
stuff.
was like-
yeah,
And it was,
but he still was the man, right,
Oh,
of
you-
his respected sport.
oh yeah. And
Yeah.
all these guys were the man.
And they all came together for this.
I think,
Flow
yeah,
rider. That's
yeah.
so cool.
Siemens, mobile phones, Swatch, Wavelock, Red Bull. This is before Red Bull was Red Bull.
Wow.
This was like early Austrian random small can
The
company.
the
yeah.
illegal Red Bulls that weren't allowed in America.
That's
they would,
awesome.
That's sick.
yeah. It was a whole nother world.
And
Like-
you guys were going to Norway. You were going. Was San Diego have one as well, or where was it all around the world? Japan.
We went to the Flow Rider was an amazing tour. It was a stationary wave. They made a mobile one, which was a bunch of containers that just popped
Wow.
up, made this wave. We went to Florence, Italy. We went to Durban, South Africa. We went to Australia. We went to Norway was a fixed one. We went to Germany, to Munich. We went, I don't know if we went to Japan. We might have gone to Japan.
I
Can't
feel like this
remember.
could
That's
make
like-
a comeback because like
That
it still
sounds-
sounds crazy.
and
Like
I'll play
the
the-
sickest tour ever.
And I'll play
Oh.
the clips too, and it's insane because you guys are doing acrobatic tricks. You're doing flips, 360s, everything.
What were you doing? Sevens or even double backs on that? At what point was there like, okay, this is my winning run trick?
I don't know what it was. I mean, coming from the surfing and windsurfing, there wasn't really names for it. It was a back loop. It was a front loop. It was an aerial. It was a flat spin. But surfers and skateboarders, they're so technical. It's a mute, grab, stale fish, upside down, revert.
Yeah,
right.
Like,
So
what is
technical.
it? You're like, okay. So the skateboarders all had names. The snowboarders all had names. And we were just hucking. I mean, I was just doing some sort of back twist 7 something.
It was kind of like rodeo flip, I
Yeah.
guess, right? Because you were backside. It was mainly, was it a left?
There was a left, and there was also a left and a right.
Oh,
One of the
okay. It's
like a double.
One of them had a double,
Yeah.
which had some Godzilla name or something weird, and it was
It must have been a crazy time. We were just talking about in our last podcast the indoor windsurfing.
yes,
And Kai was telling a story about how he was in Paris, and it was like such a trippy feeling to be doing this like ocean sport, but you're in a stadium and there's fans and there's lights. I'm sure it was like a very similar atmosphere in that, where it's like it's almost like there's a fanfare and you feel like a rock star. That must have been pretty cool.
oh, it was amazing. You were a rock star. They would
Yeah.
So
they would
sick.
start the event at night. They would have a rock band playing. You know, there was Sublime played one time.
Whoa, that's
it was
crazy.
like literally nighttime lasers, lights, similar to Bercy, the indoor event.
Yeah,
I did that a couple of years, and it was like we had suits made that were like silver suits, padded,
way.
like full on, like glow in the dark. We
way.
would, like they went all out.
That's
And
so
each
cool.
athlete had their own individual sponsors that would create an image, and we had a lot of fun. Maybe too much fun, and especially with the locations. They would, some of the best locations in the world. They just popped this thing up,
Wow.
and then we'd get to experience Europe and away from the ocean.
Yeah,
Growing-
not
growing up-
coastal,
yeah,
just
no-
like in
That's
these.
such
Yeah,
a
yeah.
different experience from what every other surfer had done as far as like a tour or just traveling around. That's like
Taking
the
you to-
coolest hybrid of two things.
Oh, it was amazing, except the water was only like 4 inches deep.
You just
And
slam.
you're on like this little skimboard thing with foot straps, which kind of came into play later. At first, it was just no foot straps. We're gliding in Norway, and I forget his name.
Did you end up doing-
Ekstrom, Carl Ekstrom designed the boards. Got into surfboard anyway.
Yeah, those are
Did
cool
you end
boards.
up doing like connecting with those guys and end up doing some stuff with them on the side, like Terrier up in Norway? Did you go snowboard with him or link up with Tony or anything down in California to
No.
skate? Because you didn't skate much, did you?
I didn't really do land sports.
Yeah, you
I
were-
always ended up getting hurt or break something.
You're
no
like,
matter
I
what.
want to be one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a motorcycle for a week. Ended up in the hospital.
You just got
Yeah.
the level went too high,
Yeah,
right?
had a mountain bike, ended up in the hospital. Had a skateboard when I was 14, broke my leg dropping in on a half pipe. Never really got into land sports. And that's
That's
But
kind
the
of
one
nice,
thing
too.
I feel like I align with you in this is like you go and ride in the water, and then to keep your mind occupied when you're on land, you just start working and tinkering on stuff
Totally.
for when you go back on the water. So your
Totally.
mind stays in the water.
totally.
But it's like you
Yeah.
go in the garage and like I remember visiting you and you put some winglets on my fins at one point, and then even just like basically putting foot straps on your shortboards to
Yeah.
make them into strap boards.
Oh, yeah. Just tinkering.
Constantly
Yeah.
tinkering, maybe seeing if you get a couple more horsepower out of those turtle jet skis, right?
Oh, totally. Rebuilding them, doing whatever it took
You were
to keep
your own
things.
mechanic for that stuff.
We all had to be.
Yeah.
There was
Wow.
no mechanic at the time. There was, Gerard came into play later. And up until then, it was like, okay, well, how do these things work? Take them apart. And I grew up, my dad did construction. So I grew up here while he built houses, and I would take stuff apart and I would build stuff as a grom. So how do things work? Shape my own skateboard, bend my own decks, take plywood.
So you've always had that natural, like that's like
Yeah.
part of like what you like to do is like invent stuff in a way, make stuff.
Exactly. I'm
Yeah.
a MacGyver and an inventor. And I'll take something and, hey, it works. Let's see if it works better. If it doesn't work, hey, you know what? At least we tried.
And-
Got to try something.
And one of those things was the hydrofoil.
Yeah, the hydrofoil was an interesting.
That must have been crazy in the early days. It's still a mind-boggling concept.
Well, when-
but
that
just
was-
starting to do it must have been.
When did
insane.
you figure out that there was this thing called hydrofoil? Like, what was the first time you saw it? Like, I heard that maybe Brett had bought an air chair or something and then showed it to you guys, or did you, like, had you gotten a hold of one yourself before?
at the time, we were experimenting with tow surfing, and we had the turtles, and Malaya was still open. So summertime, it was totally flat. We were trying to figure out how to go fast because we couldn't make surfboards go fast. We were taking surfboards, putting foot straps on them.
There's just too much rocker.
Yeah,
too light.
too wide, too thick, too much rocker, too many fins. 3 fins. It was like you can't go fast enough. So we were experimenting at Malaya, which we could drive up to the beach, put the skis in at the harbor, or just push them out of the truck because they're turtles, right?
Yeah, they
two,
only
two
weigh.
people could pick them up.
How much do those things
so
weigh?
sick.
Like 500
Yeah,
pounds?
550 with gas.
With gas.
Full. There were no sleds back then either.
Yeah.
Just take a boogie board and strap it on.
That's sick.
So we were at Malaya and experimenting with surfboards, kind of like water skis. And then I think Brett brought a hydrofoil, like a sit-down air chair.
He's like,
or
where'd you
Laird
get
had
that
it.
thing?
Somebody had one. I think it was either Laird or Brett had it, and we all tried to sit on it. What a nightmare. It was like a bucking bronco, like full whiplash. Whoa.
Especially if you
couldn't
crash
sit-
on those things, right?
Oh, we were
Like,
headbutting
Can't
our
even breathe.
knees. Yeah, it was, both feet together. You couldn't balance. You're sitting like, okay. It
probably
was,
needed more of a tower anyway for the line, right? Like, instead of getting pulled down.
Oh, totally. Yeah, the line's at water surface, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I just wanted to pull us forward, and we're like, there's got to be something. It's cool because we'd get up for a few seconds, be like, oh my god, he rode for 3 seconds in the air. That's it. Holy
He's
crap!
flying.
Oh my god, the feeling was amazing. I was like, and we were trying to go as fast as we could.
This was before kite surfing,
Well, kite surfing's a whole nother story on how that was, but I
but not to change the subject. But I was just trying to find like the timeline, like because there's so much.
Yeah, so much things.
I mean,
were
you guys were a
changing.
part of inventing. I mean, at the time there was only surfing and windsurfing, and now I have to learn 9 different sports if you want to be like a waterman,
You got me thinking. Timeline. I think the kites came in before the hydrofoil because we were doing the tow boards, experimenting with them, and then there was this guy in Oregon that his name was Corey, and he had this rigid kite with a reel bar, and I don't know who had it. Maybe Laird had one or Brett had one, but anyway, it was like a Delta kite. It had spars and a reel, and you could let it out with a brake.
It's kind of nice. They should bring back the reel.
But
Oh,
it
the reel
wasn't. It wasn't inflatable. It was a hard kite.
Yeah, it was rigid.
Wow.
It was like a 2-string kite that you'd fly here on the beach.
But it's just a big one.
Yeah, it was a monster one.
yeah.
And it had like
That sounds insane.
tapered aluminum foiled battens to keep the shape. And it actually worked. And that's a whole other story now. That's it.
But back to the hydrofoil.
Oh, yeah, so the hydrofoil. So we decided, hey, you know what? We're all surfers. We all stand up on our windsurfer surfboards. Let's give this thing a go. Let's stand on it.
Did you just cut the chair off or just stand
No.
around it?
We just stood around the chair and kind of wedged it up and then bolted some foot straps on it and then back to the garage.
Back to the garage.
Laird had a property in Haiku with Buzzy. They had like a woodworking facility or a big barn section where we'd just go and experiment.
Because before those guys, well, actually Buzzy was really famous by that point, I think. But like they
Oh,
were
yeah,
like
he was.
kind of still, it was like construction stuff too, right? Before Laird was Laird, right? Before all that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was before all that. Mm-hmm. But Laird was still kind of famous because of his movie, the North Shore
Shore.
Oh,
or
North Shore.
whatever.
Yeah.
He was some sort of real bully in the movie.
Lance Burkhart.
Lance Burkhart.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we did some experimenting, chopped the thing off, and then put wood things kind of tapered up without ruining the shaft because it was somebody else's that we're just borrowing. So we couldn't,
Oh,
we
interesting.
couldn't cut the thing. So then a few of us went to the manufacturer, Air Chair and Sky Ski. Sky Ski, they split the patent on the original single strut hydrofoil, which was a T.
Yep.
Mike Murphy had a patent, and Bob Woolley had the other half of the patent. And we got some of those things and experimented, ordered, hey, cut them off, aluminum. And then, one thing led to another. We each had our own conceptual ideas of how we wanted to make a hydrofoil board. Some wanted wakeboard, some wanted a surfboard. I was fortunate enough to have my background in construction, so I kind of modified things, but I'm not good at welding. and basically piece some stuff together. And of course, the snowboard boots, K2, clickers, quick releases.
Is that what you guys realized? Like, okay, because there's so much leverage on this thing. Like, did you try foot straps first before going to the snowboard boots?
Oh yeah, we tried foot straps on the sit-down version, and it was
just sketchy.
Oh, for sure. Thought our knees were gone, ankles were gone, couldn't control the thing.
Which is because of the 30-pound foil under there, right? And it's like short fuselage and short wingspan,
Exactly.
so there wasn't a lot of stability to it.
No stability. It was heavy, but weight is also to your advantage with speed. You know, it actually becomes stability.
Yeah.
You know, so the lighter it was, the more awkward, the more, you know, loosey-goosey it felt. So weight was to your advantage with the foils, so we'd go faster. The foot straps, yeah, they help, but they weren't good enough for your ankles, your knees. And all of us were familiar with foot straps. So we knew that, okay, what's next? And then Laird came up with some ski hard boot, downhill snow, you know, like these ski boots and bindings that were like, you know, and he's amazing at everything. So we went the other way, soft boots. You know, and we collectively as a group, we all kind of had our own aspects.
Yeah.
And we all learned from each other, and stuff that worked for you, Ridge, doesn't work for Kai. Stuff that works for you doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
We've kind of discovered that because I started shaping this year. And the reason why I started shaping was because, I mean, it's really easy to just shape exactly what you want because you know exactly what you want, right? And so with Ridge, I was like, Ridge wanted a board. I made him a board. And it was obviously made around my surfing. It was made around, like, I'm pretty front foot pressured, pretty heavy footed. Ridge is a little lighter on the water, kind of more skatey style. And immediately he was like, I don't know if this board worked. And I hopped on it. I'm like, gosh, it feels insane.
You were just ripping on it.
I was like,
something's wrong with me. I don't know what it is.
And it wasn't like I started shaping to become a shaper and please everyone, but it was like, oh, I'll make Ridge a board. And then I was all bummed when he didn't like it. And I was like, where did I go wrong on his board? You know, like I probably put more effort into his than mine. Turns out it was just like, it's such a preference thing, you know? So
yeah,
I was like, give me that thing back.
But then the interesting thing was that once I wrote it with your exact fins, I started to wrap my head around it and be like, okay, how would Kai surf it? And then the thing sort of came alive. The equipment thing is just so interesting to me, especially when it comes to like the fins. Like it's such minute differences that change the whole thing. And I can only imagine what it would be like in the early days of the hydrofoil. Like we've done a lot of stuff with hydrofoil design, and it's such minute change your whole experience, and it can take it from being
a tenth of a millimeter. You can tell.
Yeah.
And so when you can't change that much very quick, otherwise the thing's
it's really easy to make the whole thing unrideable.
Yeah, well, what works for you doesn't work for you, won't work for me.
Yeah.
It's all down to the millimeter.
What do you think about nowadays hydrofoiling being such a big sport and being pretty darn mainstream? Is it pretty crazy looking back to how it first started to now? It's every surf shop is starting to have them, and it's become commonplace.
You were 30 years, 25 years ahead of your time.
Yeah, unfortunately, but
someone had to invent it, though.
Yeah,
it just was you.
I had to pay the price. I got a lot of good donuts, but the conceptual idea behind it was what I see now. And what I saw then and I see now isn't where it's going to end up. It's going to be something that is going to be incorporated. Like, look at the GP racing, the Formula foil racing thing.
Yeah,
that's
the
like,
America's Cup stuff they're doing.
Oh my gosh, that's mind-boggling. I mean, those guys, I mean, you've been fortunate enough to actually get and also be towed and actually crash on some of those things. So what I visioned then that I'm seeing now is just the tip of the iceberg. You know, there's also things that I saw then that I haven't seen yet that will be incorporated because it will happen. And it's
so you still think there's a lot of, because I would say most people now might think of like, all right, this is how much farther can you go? But like in your big vision of what the possibilities were, we're like not even halfway. Like there's so much more to do.
Oh, totally.
And that gives me a lot of exciting, there's a lot of hope.
Well, with technology, I mean, look at what you guys have. You know,
it's insane.
I mean, just in another 10 years, you're going to be flying with nothing touching the water.
Yeah.
But, you know, maybe I'm a little crazy, but that was
You haven't been wrong yet.
Well, I've been wrong a lot of times. And
I guess
if I could go back,
development.
just buying 1 or 2 stocks in Apple back then.
Right, exactly.
Or getting
I
paid.
think that's everyone.
Getting paid in Bitcoin before it was Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So,
Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah. So, but when it comes down to it, that was the collective thing about Strapped, is that we were all unique individuals, and we all had the ability to speak our mind and collectively form a group and try and pursue something that was different. And with that, each person had their own ego. Each person had their own agenda. Each person had and I know that there's a lot of controversy, like what happened? Where did they go?
Yeah.
What happened? Was there kind of thing? But, that's for another episode. And, I don't like talking stink about anybody, but everybody had their own agenda, and, life throws you in different avenues and different.
Nothing lasts forever, unfortunately.
But those years that you guys did have are just so iconic and special to us too, because we were just growing up. We were little
Witnesses
kids
to it.
and you guys were coming out with these movies, and it seemed like such an insane time to be on Maui and just be a part of that crew. It was like, we always say it's like the Justice League or the Avengers of all the top water athletes coming together and forming this collective, and Jaws was being pioneered. It was just the coolest thing ever.
I just had a thought because, before we were on air, Rush, you were talking about how, in a way, you've lived different lives, like now you're over back here on the North Shore Oahu and you're doing something completely different than what we grew up watching you. And it just made me think, because we also were pretty lucky to grow up with, your son, and everyone started having kids. So we kind of knew you guys also through, your offsprings and everything. Yeah. And so there was that depth too. But now I'm wondering if there's ever going to be a major motion picture on the Strapped crew, because part of your job is being one of a stunt coordinator and doing all this. Would you work on that movie as, a stunt coordinator? Because you could keep it as true. And I mean, now I think shifting gears towards that, you do some pretty insane stuff. You've worked on Godzilla versus King Kong. You've just done a shore about the lifeguards here on the North Shore, and gosh, many pictures, right? All of this on the stunt side. It was Stunts Unlimited. You guys do stuff with?
There's a bunch of stunt companies. One cool thing about getting older and having the experience of all these different water sports and kind of land sports a little bit is that you guys know how to take a licking, right? Mm-hmm. You guys, like you were saying in one of the episodes, landing from 20, 30 feet in the water is worse than getting pounded on land. So to take that from years of doing that into the stunt world, and also being able to understand how filming and productions work, you can become a double for people, and you can take lickings in the water. You can be able to understand what the camera angle needs, what action needs to be done, how to incorporate it in the quickest way with the least amount of impact on anybody, as well as taking all the surf photographers and water photographers that we worked with over the years who are now in the industry. And it is a whole nother world. It's a lot of fun. It's about safety first. And that was another thing about Strapped and why we were a group, is because it was safety oriented, and it was all for one for all. Mm-hmm. And without the group of us, I don't think that any individual would have gone in the direction that they did single-handedly, or just two of them.
Yeah.
Because at the time there wasn't a safety net. There wasn't water safety. There was just us watching each other with the Zodiac of
there's
1 or 2 jet skis.
There's no way you guys could have surfed Jaws on how you did on an individual level. It seems like it had to have been the collective thing, and that gave you the confidence to be able to try to get barreled and do the things you did, which makes a lot of sense.
In order to eventually paddle into Peahi, you had to first prove that you could survive out there, and that's what tow and surfing couldn't bring, in the eras of big wave riding, it had to be tow and surfing to prove it was possible. And then at a certain point, it was okay, what could we do next,
That is the ultimate question, right? That was what we were doing is, what can you do next? What can you do with a windsurfing board? What can you do with foot straps?
So was it
what can you
ever-
do with a surfboard?
Was
What
it
can you
ever a
do-
race between you guys who could think of the next big thing? like what are we
It
gonna do
seemed like
next?
there was so many things coming out of that era.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was. Well, I wouldn't say it was a race. It was like, I got an idea. You can be the guinea pig.
You could do that.
Hey, why don't you try it? See where you can take this. I mean, one of the most classic. You guys are familiar with K-Bay, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
The cow field up on the top. There's,
Yep.
Oops, sorry. There's used to be cows in it, fenced off. Well, we had a parapont, one of the first kind of kite experiments, and Laird decided he was gonna get in a trash can and go through the field with the kite, parapont. So this is as we're learning how to kite with the other one with the reel, and kind of like, oh, let's try a mini parapont. See what we're all standing there, barbed wire fences all around, and then the sheer cliff drop to
Yeah, like
K-Bay
200-foot cliff.
on the other side, right? So we launched the kite. All you see is this green flash. Laird going through the field.
Was he in the trash can?
In the
still?
trash can, cow pies flying off the front of it. Just
No way.
just
insane.
through the field. Big donut rolls. That's kind of where the power was like, oh my God, not just this little kite. We can use a parapont, double-sided. So it was back to the collective group of,
That was
I got
the
an
earliest
idea.
of kite surfing, right?
Oh yeah, this two-string kite
Yeah.
came from
Pure death.
Wipeouts from France.
Yeah.
I brought one of the original ones back from, I think his name was Bruno or something.
Uh-huh.
And was like, oh, here's this two-string kite. I mean, I got so ragdolled outside your guys' house at Sugar Cove. I split my wetsuit top all the way down around. I was wearing white shorts. I popped my hip out of the socket,
Oh my God.
stretched my hamstring, tore my fingernail off, and all I did was bleed all down my white.
Oh my God.
Paddled into your guys', bailed the kite, because back then it was two strings, no
It was just full on the whole
depower
time.
it.
Can't
There's no
depower.
depower.
No,
yeah.
like, what is
Gosh.
this? And we're on I was on a little towboard, and we only could do downwinders, right? You couldn't stay upwind.
So
with the
you would
kite.
just start up the coast and just go down. with
Yeah,
it.
we'd start at Lanes or Hokipa, jump in, like three of us would just go. And it's, okay, I'll see you somewhere. So I ended up on the highway hitchhiking, totally covered in blood, limping,
Oh my
just
God.
my board.
Wait, did you get like dragged across rocks or?
No, I
You just hit
I
that
did just
hard.
a big jump and landed and did the splits when I landed.
Just
and
one
then
foot
got
came
yanked. You know when you land and get yanked at
Yeah,
the same
yeah.
time? So it was like,
Oh no.
and that was one of the
That was
original.
something.
Yeah. So, I mean, all these things, like you're saying, is how did we do it? We all just, hey, I got an idea. Why don't you try it? Let's, do you have the means to?
It's
come up with
just,
something?
yeah, it's so impressive. You guys laid the groundwork because that's the hardest part about these things is just starting. Once someone does it and you see it's possible, it's like, okay, I could do that.
Totally.
And you build upon it and you make it better. But to start from absolute scratch is you have to be pretty brave to want to do that, especially at places where it's really high consequence. Jaws, even doing the kiting thing. When
Well,
I
I
first
just can't
started,
imagine
it's
being
insane.
the one to break the ice out of Jaws because it was like by the time it was my turn out there, tow and surfing was still like the relevant thing. I think you and Pete won the biggest wave ever ridden at the time on the left, and
Yeah.
it was like that was 2004, and I was a couple years later. But I guess the point is that the only idea I have of like maybe the first would be when all of a sudden I'm thinking I'm going to be killing it tow and surfing out of Peahi, and then Shane Dorian shows up.
Oh,
And he's just has
The
he's
beginning.
armed with like a 10-6 and he's like, we're paddling now. And then, the rules, like someone's paddling surfing,
Yeah.
there's no tow and surfing. And sure enough, then that was like, oh gosh, like now I'm a part of that ice break,
Yeah. Yeah. What was it?
that. I mean, we're getting into rules. Like you're saying, the new era, the
Yeah.
paddle surfing, nobody towing.
Yeah.
That was kind of our life. When we were windsurfing, there was no rule saying we couldn't windsurf before 11. So then there was the issue with the surfers at Hokipa, okay? Then there was the law, can't windsurf before you're 11. Then there was the kite surfing. Oh, FAA shut us down because you can't be within 5 miles of an airport. And Kahului Airport is, 5 miles from Hokipa almost?
yeah.
So we couldn't do it anywhere in there. So we had to prove to the FAA that the kites stayed on the ground, they didn't fly. So then they made that rule. And then there was the jet skis. Then there was no permitting or
You could go anywhere, right?
You could do anything.
It was a free for all.
It was what it was. It was a jet ski. There was no thrill craft. You didn't need a license. You didn't need all this
now
stuff.
you need like 2 licenses or something
Yeah.
crazy.
And then, I mean, most of these sports that the strap team kind of collectively came up with ended up getting kind of.
I guess with popularity, it has to happen eventually, right?
Yeah, you always had your donkeys that came in and were like, oh my God, well, I can do this. I got money. I'm going to buy this. I can do, and then
then
just
they kinda-
speed through the surfers in the lineup.
Yeah, and just ruins it for everybody.
Yeah, and then the paddle surfing.
Yeah.
Then paddle surfers, just like the surfing rule, 1 or more, you got to stay away. So that kind of ruined the Peahi, Jaws. Oh, that's another thing. The Jaws. I mean, we're just talking about stories, right? You want to hear some stories. So in one of your podcasts, you're like, oh, they called it Jaws. The strap team called it Jaws. That's actually not really why we called it Jaws. It was called Peahi or Peahi, as you historically coined it, right? When we were trying to keep it really secret, we were trying to keep it like, hey, we don't want anybody up there. We're learning how to do this kind of stuff.
No
This
one's
is fun.
filming or
Nobody
anything.
filming. We
Wow.
tried to shut people down. We didn't want to blow it out. There was this photographer. I think his name was Patrick McFeely or McFeely.
Guys were catching on. They're like, what are these guys up to?
they're
Like,
like,
you'd hear rumors, right?
Yeah.
Coconut Wireless.
I mean, yeah, you'd see us, kind of secretly leave from Ilima's. Kind of like, oh.
Like down at Baldwin.
They're gotta be doing something.
And you guys used to spray the skis camo so people wouldn't see it, right? Like if it was in the back of the car or just because it's cool.
It was just because they're kind of ugly looking. They were like purple and white and plus you could fix them and just
I always
spray
thought it
over
was like-
camera.
Like they're just, it's a secret mission.
I thought they would
need to
just,
be
you guys would
undercover.
put it in the back of the truck, put a tarp, and people would think it was like, maybe, I don't know, bushes or something.
Yeah, we're doing dump runs.
Dump runs, straight to
dump runs,
Maliko.
in the water. So yeah, somebody decided to make a book, and it was like the first, and they trademarked the name Jaws.
Oh, wow.
And so they were forcing us to. They were going to use our pictures.
But isn't that funny how like people can like take photos of you and use it for their own gain, but then like they'll charge you for it, and you're like, hey, you're taking stuff.
There would be no photo without me on it.
I know, like I still trip out on that because sometimes people will be like, oh, I'm gonna charge you this much for this clip. And I'm like, where can I say you can't use it?
Yeah, at the same time, they're going and selling it to every
I'm
company
like,
making
you
money
can't
off
use
of
it.
it.
Like, what are you doing? Oh, well, it's like free use of it, and that's why we have paparazzi.
That gives them a job.
Yeah.
So it ended up being this coffee book, right? And they had this.
We actually had that.
Yeah, it was like
Our parents'
the
house.
original Jaws book, but it all stemmed from somebody saying that they were going to put the book out with the name Jaws. They had trademarked it. They were going to do it with or without us. They had the rights to do it because we didn't have model releases with anybody back then. It was public domain. So I guess that was why it was called Jaws.
Wow.
It wasn't because we decided it was going to be Jaws and this.
I just thought it was if there's probably the sickest name ever is Jaws.
It's a pretty cool name.
Well, it was called Dragon's Breath.
I see. I
Yeah,
always
I
knew
had
it.
never
see.
heard that before he mentioned it a couple podcasts ago.
I
was.
remember Jerry telling me that,
Yep.
but then over time you start questioning, like, did I just make that up? Like in my own head.
Pretty darn cool name.
That's
too.
some lore right there.
It was because you know how every time it's just like Backdoor.
Yeah.
And then there's rainbows in it, and depending what time of day.
But it was also called Domes at one
It's
point.
called Domes, Dragon's Breath, but the actual Ahupa is Peahi or Peahi. So I was like, God, there's so many stories about.
Yeah, I won't.
Let's go back. Come on, Rich.
Yeah, no,
Bring me back to
curious.
something
I'm
else.
so
Bring me back
curious
to
just
that.
to know about the transition from the windsurfing to the towing. Were you guys just windsurfing out there and just thinking, oh, we'd rather be surfing without a sail? Or what made it so you had to develop the towing thing where, you could be on a tiny board with foot straps and have that sort of ultimate freedom on the wave?
Lose the restriction of the sail, perhaps. Or is it just like you said, you came from surfing first, so it was like naturally you're like, well, we just want to surf this wave.
Part of me doesn't remember why. It's just that collectively, our whole thing was to experiment and have fun.
Yeah.
So everything was, leading from one thing to another thing. And it was like all of us had surfing backgrounds, the majority of us. If not, then, we trusted. Plus, with windsurfing, you go so fast. You're familiar with chop, bouncing, jumping, aerials. So to incorporate the strap board was kind of like doing speed sailing. I mean, you guys done speed sailing on those little narrow channel things? I mean, you're going... just
the skimming of the board.
Just the chatter, and to take the surfboards to Peahi without the sail was, I guess, the evolution, the next step. Like, okay, we can surf.
Did you guys just tap into the windsurf board shapers and be like, hey, we want, or did you just, who was it that you're like making your boards? Is Jerry probably one of the first guys then?
I think, well, there was Derek, Victor, Jerry, and Laird, who all came from like the major surfing background. And I remember growing up here on the North Shore, living at Backyards or Sunset Point, and watching Double D, Derek Dorner, and Laird and Buzzy go out on a Zodiac, and they got towed in at Backyards. And this was, I don't know, maybe late 80s, not even late 80s, mid 80s after Eva, but they went big swell, went out to Phantoms, got towed in, and that was, I was here for Christmas or something with my grandparents, went back to Maui, they came over there, and they had that surfing background. So we kind of incorporated, it's there's so many memories with all these different, the origins of each thing. We're kind of a combination.
We're making you think deep now.
And honestly, I really haven't thought about this stuff in maybe 20 years.
Wow.
That's awesome.
And I watched the podcast, one of you guys' shows the other day, and I was like, wow, I forgot about that. That was a good time. How did we do that? And then you asked me to be on the show, and I was like,
I think
I might have to remember stuff.
I think the cool thing too is like back then, the documented stuff, we've seen, I guess, the stuff that had been put out or whatever, but there's still a lot of mystery behind it. And that's, I think, what also added to how cool that era was, because, we're constantly wondering of what was it like, or what was happening. And nowadays everything's just so well documented. By the time you get a wave at Jaws, and by the time I get to the beach, there's like already videos out, and I can watch myself surf, because people are just up on the cliff and stuff. So it's like nothing goes unnoticed, except, I guess your own memories, like
You do
being
think-
out there.
I don't know how you guys deal with it nowadays. Honestly, there is so much social media attention that you don't really have a life. You can't step away. Everybody's constantly on this thing. Like, okay, what's somebody else doing? What's going on? Where's the best wave's going to be? Oh, my wave. I got how many likes? Yeah, there's always. I mean, back then we didn't have that, and to see you guys nowadays have this, to be able to critique yourselves like instantly, back to the boat. Okay, should have bottom turn there. Oh, that was a chop. Especially during the events, is a whole nother world. You guys have it. It's almost more difficult because the peer pressure, the image, the sponsors, everything's instantly there
Under a microscope, for sure.
for people to just say, "Oh my God, what was he doing?
Yeah,
he shouldn't have
barrel
done that."
dodged it or something like that.
And you're like, I'm just trying to figure this
Yeah,
out.
I think my most favorite big wave sessions is when there's no one filming it and it's just us two out, and it feels like it's just so pure. And you guys did that for so many years at Jaws. That must have been so awesome. Like,
Ridge, that was the true reason we did it, was to go and experiment and have fun with our friends, brothers, family on the cliff, and nobody else. And just, that was it. It was having fun, getting away. That was the thing about Peahi, was getting away from the rat race at Hokipa.
Because that was at that time just like
was
so
the
many
mecca.
people, huh?
It was a mecca for windsurfing, as well as, surfing. There was, as you know, Maui's got, 3 or 4 waves?
yeah.
Yeah,
In winter, that's the only
That's it.
spot on most
Yeah,
days.
yeah. Well, you got Honolulu,
Yeah.
maybe Malaya every 10 years.
Yeah.
Or La Perouse. But there's also some other good waves, hidden waves on Maui that you guys probably know. but
Yeah.
don't want to say
We
it.
don't talk about those.
I feel
What?
like Maui
Oh, no, no.
actually has the best waves on Earth that never break.
That's
Oh,
so
definitely.
true.
Like
Yeah.
the best waves on planet Earth, if anywhere, and maybe densely, it's always windy, or it's, it needs a pure north swell, or it needs a pure west, or because you'll see them every once in a while, and I'm like, that's better than
Anywhere
Indo,
we've ever traveled.
but I'm like,
Yeah.
why have I only seen it once?
yeah.
But that's the cool thing about Maui.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's one of those places where you have the opportunity to have numerous sports at your fingertips.
Yeah.
Oahu is, it's got surf. It's got great surf all around.
Yeah.
You don't have the wind here. So you also have these you have these single-minded, surfing-oriented people here.
Mm-hmm.
Maui, it's open-minded. Everybody is, hey,
For
you know what?
sure.
Like Ridge, I remember you guys stand-up boogie boarding at Sugar Cove.
Yeah.
Like my wife used to babysit you guys. We'd go down. Sugar Cove was a great place to train.
Yeah,
launch in and
for
out. Both
everything,
you
yeah.
guys, boogie boarding, stand-up boogie boarding, kite surfing, foiling. It's a nice. I mean, is that your secret spot?
No, it's not a good enough
It's
way
all
to be.
blown.
a
Oh
secret
God,
spot.
no,
Yeah,
no,
no, I
it's
didn't
cool
blow it
now
out.
though. No, it's super cool now though, because like Sugar Cove, there's like 30 kids. Like it's like
It's
a stepping
awesome,
stone
yeah.
place. You learn how to surf over on the South Shore, and then Sugar Cove is like where you get introduced to the North Shore now. And all the kids go there, and it's nothing better than kids, and just seeing
Totally.
them I'm like, all these kids are gonna be better than I am now when they're like 15, because that's just the natural progression of things. And then they graduate to Hokipa. And I think the difference between, then and now is like everyone does everything sort of thing now. Like,
That's the cool thing about
Yeah,
Maui. You guys
yeah.
have the opportunity to do anything. You're not single-mindedly focused on, I'm going to be a professional surfer. It's like, I can surf, I can windsurf, I can kite surf, I can foil surf, I
you
can
kind
stand
of
up
don't
surf.
have options. You're
It's
like, well, there's no way.
Yeah,
I
I
gotta do
have to do
something.
something
Yeah.
else.
It gets windy at 11, or actually 10:30, 11, and then it gets glassy in the afternoon. And then, I can go down the coast, I can go up the coast. I mean,
Yeah, it's so cool seeing a lot of the core surfers we grew up with that it seemed like they would never do any other sport, and they would say that themselves, like, "Oh, surfing's everything." And then slowly, like as those other equipment has gotten better, they'll start foiling and winging, and it's really become super accepted over there to be a top level surfer and also be like, "Yeah, I love to go on a downwind foil every summer."
Well, there's no excuses now because,
Yeah.
for example, John Florence is like almost more excited about going foiling now. And he loves sailing. And I've been trying to tell him for a little bit here. I'm like, John, you're the best surfer in the world. You love sailing. Have you ever thought of windsurfing? It's right in the middle. Like, if you could do that really quick, so
I don't think his manager wants him to do that. That's a scary thought, actually.
I
mean,
think he would be insane
Just
at
the
it.
danger of it.
Yeah, because it's dangerous, especially up here, right?
Right.
It's a
I'm
little,
like, you
it's a little
backyard.
shallow.
No.
Couple more world titles and then you can
Maybe when
go
he
to it.
retires.
Yeah. Off the wall
That's
question, but do you have any memories of maybe your best Jaws wave that wasn't documented? I'm just so curious about all those years that weren't documented. They must have gotten like the most insane waves ever that we've never seen.
Or even just your
Okay.
best wave.
Yeah, or just best wave in general.
That's one thing about big wave surfing, tow surfing, especially at Peahi, is you're never looking back. So you never see what you're on. Like you guys have probably
True,
experienced
yeah.
this. You catch a wave, you're looking down, you're focused on everything. You never see what's behind you. You're in the zone, you've checked out, you're surviving. I think that to answer your question, whether or not I can remember what my best wave was, I really don't know what it was, but I will say that one of the scariest, most amazing adventures that happened during our blackout, we'll call it the blackout era.
Yeah.
It was like January 28, 1998. And I want to say the buoys were around 28.
What?
It was
I've never even heard of that.
it was so scary, and I brought a weather radio with me because I wanted you guys to experience what it was like pre-social media,
Here, I'll grab it real quick.
pre-Surfline. It is basically just a weather radio that tells you the wind, the
Yeah.
buoys, and that's what we lived off of. It was our means of
Because you
surf line.
you didn't have 2-week forecasts. You couldn't
No.
see, oh, there's a big storm up in the
we had-
northern Pacific.
Oh yeah, here we go. Check this thing out. So this is what we kind of live by. It was weather radio. Oh, and you.
Then 7 to 10 feet in the early morning hours.
This is forecasting
10 to 14
tomorrow.
feet Saturday.
10 to 40. Okay.
West facing shores 2 to 4 feet this evening. Then 4 to 6 feet in the early morning hours. 5 to 7 feet Saturday.
So this is what we lived off
Wow.
of. So this is how we knew. Okay, we're 10 hours behind Oahu. It's going to hit buoy 1. 10 hours. It's going to peak tomorrow. Okay, mathematically figure it out. So January 28th or 27th, it was like forecasted within a day or two. It was going to be. We had a blackout day, which was we tried to shut out all the media, which kind of was to our disadvantage because back then, we had digital cameras like these things, DV cameras. This was my helmet camera, by the way, and my
That's
board
so
mount.
cool.
Not way pre GoPro, and there was only around 5 of us that surfed that day, and it was so big that there wasn't really a channel. The channel was just boils of sand
Whoa.
in where you would park the boats nowadays and the skis was just sand boils.
It was just turbulent water.
Turbulent.
The water had nowhere to go.
Yeah, exactly. It was almost like the bay closing out here.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh.
There was just a handful of us that rode waves that day. A lot of the crew didn't ride at all. It was just
They were just like, nope.
But like you experienced up there, it was like once you got one, hey, I can do another one.
Yeah.
But I got one, maybe 2. I didn't look back. I rode it to the channel, and this is again before it was Barrel Fest.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, it's just pull in, how deep,
Pull and pray.
pull and pray. So that was one of the days that sticks in my brain, and I saw some riding mountains, which
Wow.
was some of the video. It was, I could get, I don't know, it was a past life. It was one of those different era, different time.
I did hear that it was like you guys when you were dropping in, and maybe it was the equipment too at the time, but like there was so much water sucking up the face that it felt like you were going backwards, and a lot of guys ended up just kicking out. Like they'd be dropping in, and then it was just too much, like
Totally.
too much suction, and they'd end up just kicking out and hope the ski was there to grab them for the next one.
Oh, yeah, there were some very close calls back then because our equipment wasn't up to par. It was still in the
Development.
development, R&D, what works. What about twin fins? We're trying to get the windsurfing into the surfing and the boards, kind of like water skis and speed skis, and some didn't work, some were too wide. Then there was the shortboard revolution, which was like the bullets, these narrow kind of smaller, that came from the kiteboarding, kind of a kiteboarding / mix with the tow board. I don't know. Wow.
Yeah, I can only imagine. On that day, did it seem like it was maxing out the reef, or was it sort of loading up and slabbing off the outside?
Or maybe it was just in another peak entirely.
Yeah.
It was like, when your guys are out there towing, and from my recollection, a part of me recalls being during, say, Pete's wave, whatever, XXL champ. You see those dark shadows coming when you come up over one. You can count, like you can go, okay, I want 2, I want 3.
Yeah.
You kind of relate to your partner. That day it was just like corduroy.
Just nonstop.
You had corduroy coming off the cliff where the backwash was creating a corduroy. So it looked like X's in the ocean.
Whoa.
And you had these dark, ominous swells that were just like nonstop. And then you'd have ones that were like purple.
Jeez.
And you'd come up over one and you'd be like, we were only out for a little while, I think.
Did anybody fall?
I don't remember. It was kind of one of those blackout moments. And then we got in, there was a few photos of stuff, and it was just like, which I'm sure there's some video footage.
I'll try
And
to
at that
It was
time, were
like-
you guys just like, just because people started to catch on, so you're like, hey, let's just pull this thing back in, like no videos, no photos, or was it just so big, like let's just?
It was so big you couldn't get out. You know when Maliko's so big,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
all the way up past the bridge, up under,
Wow.
getting washed. And I think I put my truck in the water that day.
Oh,
Putting the ski in, it filled the truck up, sucked it back into the ocean, but tailgate luckily opened so I could drive out.
I think to wrap it up, I think a cool thing I really wanted to ask was your wipeouts back then when you were just in board shorts. Could you take us through what that was like to fall on a Peahi wave without inflation or flotation or anything like that?
Well, back then, I mean, it was still experimental, right?
Yeah.
Still, does it work? Can we ride it? And we started on the shoulder and worked our way to the peak, except for like Laird and Dave and I guess Victor was always in the pit too. But falling without a vest, without PFD on, it was, it was survival, but we didn't know any better. It was like, it was just like windsurfing, big Hokipa or outer specs, with a harness on. I do remember that you would get held down, and it depends where you land, right? If you're in the barrel, safest place is in the barrel. You hit the void, boom, you get shot up the back. If you land on the face and go over, you're going for a ride. We did lose a lot of skis, lost a lot of boards, but it was, I want to say it wasn't until Dave decided to take out one of those orange balls that you tie your boat to, the mooring balls, and it was like, let's see, like a snowboard, snowboard avalanche thing, you jump in, they had those little things that inflate and keep you on top. And Dave comes from a skiing background, so he got into windsurfing, then surfing, natural athlete, amazing athlete. Tried with a ball, jumped in front, dropped off in front of the whitewater. This is before PFDs or anything. Jumped off, held the ball, just rolled in. But the thing was, he just kept rolling in.
He didn't come up. He was just getting strapped.
No, it's just like, and then under and up. And it was like, it works. So then it was a matter of bringing it down in size, take some PFDs. What's a PFD? Impact vest, more of the wakeboarding kind of crossover stuff. Not the lifeguard ones, too big. But yeah, the hold downs there were depending. I mean, some guys got held down a long time. Some guys didn't. Depends where you fall.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough that I didn't really get held down that many times. I did blow my knee out one time pulling in.
Oh.
Wood board, balsa boards, which I kind of like balsa boards. And to answer your question about the shapers earlier, Jerry was very instrumental in shaping the toe boards that you would see. He worked with Derek and Victor and Laird, and I think Dave had a couple of his boards, but my boards and a couple other guys came from more of the windsurfing. There was Tim Pony was shaping boards, Carl Hill was shaping boards. Carl shaped some of mine, Tim Pony shaped some of mine. There was Kinoshita, Matt was shaping some at the time.
What was your Jaws stance? Your
28.
28?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's insane. Mine is 26 and a half right now.
Yeah, we're like, I
I'm
feel like
6
both
foot.
of us are slowly going wider over
It
over time.
depends. It depends, though, what your balance is, what your core is.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a different stance. I'm 6 foot.
Okay, so
it's like-
That makes
makes
sense
sense.
because
I'm
I'm
taller.
5'8".
Yeah,
so
so
that's
it's your shoulder
Yeah,
widths.
because we ride the exact same. Actually, our Jaws boards are identical.
maybe you need
Same
a different
stance.
board though.
Yeah, maybe. But I feel like I like a tiny bit narrower stance for what my body type is, so it ends up being the same on the Jaws boards. Because you like a little bit wider stance, I guess, for your body type.
Yeah, you like a wider stance. You're a little more balanced. You're a little more stand up.
Yeah.
Knees bent.
Yeah.
More drop elbow. You're more wide.
Because I'm trying to stay.
Oh yeah, you're tensing up with that kung fu.
Yeah, the kung fu hands.
Gonna get it. No, but it also depends on where your balance point is on the board. Like I used to balance my boards by picking them up and then moving my fingers to where the board was like a dart, and then putting the lead there, and then putting the straps to balance it out.
So that's where you put the weight was just right at
Just
the balance.
the center of
just like a dart.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, I'm going to balance my board according to where I want it to sit.
Funny because now our boards are all weighted in the tail, like they're mainly
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
tail,
Yeah.
and they're all carbon, like windsurf basically, not with a sandwich construction, but the nose bends and the tail is super stiff.
So do you get flex and drive like a snowboard when you go to lay in on a turn? Like,
I could feel a little bend, but it's mostly when you're going straight down big chop, the nose like kind of absorbs it. And then like a trophy truck where, it's pretty squatted in the back, the tail sits really nice.
It kind of just drops
It
with
drops
the tail.
and it doesn't skip sideways. Like,
You don't get it where I think some of the old boards they'll catch up front and then you get that like jerk forward. I feel like the new boards they kind of just tail drop anytime there's bumps.
flatter rocker, V, concave, double.
I'd say my magic board right now is single to double concave.
Do you know the water skiers, the speed water skiers? You see there's fins? They got holes in them.
We were just talking about that.
Tell me about that.
So they got holes in them because you get the laminar flow, right? Water on water is the fastest. So it creates a bond in there. So it's water on water, which, as you see, it's just a blade,
Should we start
right?
drilling holes in our fins?
We just need... Where do we go from there? Do you remember when Brett tried to put a bicycle on a tow
that
board
was sick.
and got towed in at Peahi with it?
Yeah, he's
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
we gotta find
Occasionally, well, now
Yeah,
Brett's only pickleball, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so,
Pickleball
And he
guy.
invented some sort of pickleball paddle.
that's all he does
Yeah,
now.
it's like,
that. That's so sick.
It's crazy.
well, thank you guys.
All right,
No
until
big
next
deal.
time.
See you guys next time. Shoots.